Morning. I'm Gary Michelson, the president here at Congregation Or Shalom, and I would like to welcome you all to our 17th annual Kristallnacht commemorative event. I feel obligated, before we start, I know it's in this day and age, I need to remind everyone, if you could please either turn off or silent your cell phones, it would be much appreciated. Thank you. Well, thank you all for joining us today, both here in person, and I know there's a number of people joining us online. It's so nice to see a group of people getting together, especially for a program of this significance and this importance. I'd also like to thank our honored guests for traveling so far to be with us today. And forgive my lack of language, but I would like to say grazie. I would also like to thank our sponsors who made today possible through their generous donations: Congregation Or Shalom Men's Club, the Yellow Candle Fund, the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven, and the Tracy Selman and family. I'd also like to thank our Adult Education Committee, chaired by Sarah Dara, for the tireless hours that they have put in to help coordinate today's program. And last, but certainly not least, I want to thank our spiritual leader, Rabbi Alvin Wainhouse, whose passion for this project has really been the driving force behind the Kristallnacht event for all these years. I hope you'll find today's program both informative and inspiring. But without further ado, I turn it over to our spiritual leader, Rabbi Wainhouse.
Gary, is this yours?
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Once again, please turn cell phones off. Welcome. Welcome to Greater New Haven's 17th annual Kristallnacht Commemoration. Friends, our November gatherings these past 17 years have had two purposes, two distinct aims. Firstly, we've gathered to recall a catastrophe that occurred 85 years ago at this time of the year, known as Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht, the very word still fills us with anguish and dismay. Kristallnacht refers to the horrific events that took place on November 9th and 10th, 1938, in the parts of Europe that were already ruled by Nazism just before the start of World War II. The nightmare of Kristallnacht began during the night of November 9th, 1938, and continued for about 48 hours. In the course of those two nights, mobs rampaged through the streets of Germany, Austria, and Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia in a massive anti-Jewish attack planned and executed by the Nazi government. During those 48 hours, many people of the Jewish faith were murdered and maimed. Thousands were dragged off to concentration camps. Thousands of Jewish-owned stores and businesses were vandalized and looted. And infamously, during those two nights, over 1,000 synagogues, most of the Jewish houses of worship within the Nazi sphere, were dynamited and burned to the ground in full view of the police, who simply stood by and celebrated, stood by and cheered the police. The Nazi authorities would later call those nights sarcastically nights of broken glass, Kristallnacht, referring to the shattered window panes and shards of stained glass that littered the streets in the aftermath of the horror. Ultimately, of course, Kristallnacht would end up shattering much more than windows. The events of Kristallnacht turned out to be just the beginning, only the prelude to a much larger catastrophe that was about to shatter all of Europe and all of European Jewry. And thus, at this time of Kristallnacht commemoration, we cannot help but remember that over the following 7 years, from 1938, Kristallnacht, until the end of World War II, approximately 6 million innocent Jewish men, women, and children, about 40% of the world's Jewish population, including, incidentally, all my aunts, all my uncles, all my cousins, would be murdered, systematically slaughtered. We cannot help but remember that by 1945, the very heartland of Jewish civilization and Yiddish culture, European Judaism, Yiddishkeit, lay in ruins. Friends, at this time of Kristallnacht commemoration, we remember as well approximately 5 million innocent souls, gypsies, mentally disabled people, gay people, and many, many more innocent men, women, and children who were branded by Nazi Germany as unerwünscht, unwanted, undesirable, and marked for death. But why observe Kristallnacht? Why focus on the beginning of this appalling period in world history? We do this because in the aftermath of Kristallnacht, in the aftermath of the barbaric events of those 2 days, the world was largely silent. You know, Elie Wiesel's famous book, Night, had a different title. Elie Wiesel wrote, may he rest in peace, wrote that book in Yiddish after the war. And the title he gave it was not Night. That was the American edition, the title of the American edition. Elie Wiesel's title was Und die Welt hat geschwiegen. Do you know what that means? Und die Welt hat geschwiegen. And the world was silent. The overwhelming majority of peace-loving people around the world simply assumed that the evil would pass. It's a temporary situation, a momentary mishigas, a momentary bout of lunacy. People would whisper to one another, "You'll see." Germany, the birthplace of some of the world's greatest intellectual and artistic achievements, home to some of the finest universities and seats of learning in the world, will surely come to its senses, they insisted. But looking back in hindsight, however, we know the truth. It was that very silence, that very denial of the evil, staring everyone in the face, that gave Nazism permission, that gave Germany a green light to proceed with its obscene plan. We gather at this time of the year, therefore, to remember that in the words of Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. And so we gather every year, not just to remember, but to take to heart that warning. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. And therefore we come together year after year, not only to condemn the hate that gave rise to Kristallnacht, but to condemn the hate that still exists today, now, as I speak. Friends, I'm sure you realize that this year, our commemoration of Kristallnacht takes on much greater significance. For we find ourselves these days, sadly, living in a time of rising hate and bigotry. The Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, reports that the year 2023 has seen a sharp increase globally in hate and hate crimes aimed at minorities and minority groups of all kinds. And as you also know, sadly, unfortunately, among the groups targeted by racists and bigots around the world, we, people of the Jewish faith, the Jewish people, have been targeted like never before in this country, the land of the free and the home of the brave, right here in our beloved United States of America, right here in the world's oldest democracy. The world's oldest hatred has reared its head more openly and more brazenly than most of us can remember. And as you know all too well, unbelievably, the unspeakable atrocities committed on October 7th, on that Shabbos morning of Simchas Torah, just about 5 weeks ago in southern Israel, those atrocities have only served to stoke the increasing anti-Semitism, unbelievably. For on October 8th, the day after that bloodthirsty rampage in southern Israel, planned and executed by the terrorist organization Hamas, which took the lives of over 1,200 men, women, and children and resulted in the kidnapping of approximately 240 people, including babies, children and babies. On October 8th, the day after, the very next day, the evil perpetrated by those inhuman butchers was celebrated. Yes, celebrated by millions. Not there, here in this country. Celebrated by, quote, civilized people. And mind-bogglingly, cheered by students at the most prestigious college campuses in the country. Mind-bogglingly. The day after, friends, as I mentioned, we come together here year after year, not only to condemn the hate that gave rise to Kristallnacht then and there, but to condemn the hate that exists here and now. And not there, but here in this country. And so this year, more urgently than ever, we proclaim, "Wir wollen nicht schweigen," to paraphrase Elie Wiesel, we will no longer be silent. Even as the world watched speechlessly after Kristallnacht, "Wir wollen nicht schweigen," we will not be silent. We come together this year to proclaim, more urgently than ever, evil will not, must not, and will not have the final word. Evil must not and will not have the final say. We open our commemoration this morning with the lighting of a flame and a word of prayer. At this time, I'll call upon Mr. Mitch Goldblatt, a prominent member of our men's club, to come forward and kindly light the Holocaust Memorial Candle. It was Mitch's dad, Mr. Barry Goldblatt, may he rest in peace, Olav Shalom, who originally designed this candle, this yellow candle, produced by the Federation of Men's Clubs of Conservative Judaism. The candle's color recalls the yellow star of David, the Magen David, the Nazi government forced us to wear during the years of the Holocaust, targeting us for death. I'll ask you to kindly rise at this time as we light the candle of remembrance, the yellow candle. Whatever you want now or later. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. The Or Shalom Men's Club Yellow Candle Fund is a major benefactor of today's Kristallnacht program. I'm proud to chair our Yom HaShoah, our Holocaust Remembrance Yellow Candle program, which has grown exponentially since my father started this years ago. The Yom HaShoah candle is now a major project of the Jewish Federation of Men's Clubs, who distribute hundreds of thousands of these candles every year. While I will light a yellow candle in a few moments, it is traditionally lit on the evening before Yom HaShoah, our Holocaust Remembrance Day, which will fall on May 6, 2024. Yellow candles are distributed to all our congregants, and voluntary contributions are what make programs like today's possible. If anyone would like a yellow candle for themselves, please see me after today's program. For so many years, when we light a yellow candle, we remember the Holocaust and utter these words, never again. Now, we say, never again is now. While we will not be afraid, we must be vigilant. I will now light our yellow candle to keep the memory alive, remembering the 6 million Jews and several million Gentiles who perished during the Holocaust.
Baruch Notea Chaye Olamim Betochenu, beloved art thou, who instilled in us the faith that our blessed deeds, our acts of justice and loving kindness and peace enable life to triumph over death. We'll pause now for a moment of personal prayer and silent reflection. Please keep in mind the many who were murdered on October 7th. Please keep in mind the unfortunate innocents who are caught in the crossfire. Please join me now in an age-old prayer for peace. Shalom. Ose shalom bimromav, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol. When we close our eyes, we can see the way this world could be, the way this world could be. Ya'aseh shalom. Let's be seated. Mitch, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you and our men's club for being so supportive of our annual Kristallnacht commemorations over the years. And to all who are attending this event, please consider obtaining one of these yellow candles in the spring before Pesach, before Passover, and lighting it during the week following Passover, leading up to Holocaust Memorial Day, Yom HaShoah. Please call the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven or Congregation Or Shalom to obtain one of these yellow candles. Thank you again, Mitch. Friends, as I mentioned, we've gathered here every November for two reasons, two purposes that are very different in spirit and even diametrically opposed. The first is, of course, to commemorate. But our second and perhaps even more powerful reason for gathering has been to remember that although some of the most horrific scenes in the annals of human history took place during the Holocaust, it's also true that in the midst of the darkness, the moral darkness that descended on Europe during World War II, there were those who refused to remain silent, those who chose to stand up to evil rather than stand by and watch it happen. We gather to remember the extraordinary life-saving deeds performed by these ordinary people, often at great risk, great peril to their lives, and some paid the ultimate price, made the ultimate sacrifice, simply to do the right thing. In fact, at our annual Kristallnacht Commemoration, we've highlighted and celebrated the life-saving conscience and courage of these brave souls. And in doing so, we've proclaimed the self-sacrificing acts performed by these amazing people, these remarkable people, will never be forgotten. In the midst of the darkness, they were beacons. In the midst of the darkness, they were brilliant flames, reminding us that there is still inconceivable goodness and kindness in the human heart. And why do this here in a shul, in a sanctuary? The answer is in a word. In celebrating the acts of these heroes here in God's sanctuary, we remind ourselves as to what religion is truly about, what every great religion was always really about. That is, the quest for menschlichkeit, the quest for greater humanity, the quest to be truly human. Which brings us to this morning's program. Our program this morning is a celebration of the humanity, the menschlichkeit of three physicians who worked at Rome's Fatebenefratelli Hospital in 1943. Ironically, the name of the hospital, Fatebenefratelli, means "do good, my brothers" in Italian. It's a 500-year-old, approximately 500-year-old hospital. The Do Good, My Brothers Hospital. The names of the physicians we honor this morning were Dr. Giovanni Borromeo, director of the Fatebenefratelli Hospital. May his memory be a blessing. Zichrono livrocha. Dr. Vittorio Sacerdoti. May his memory be a blessing. Zichrono livrocha. A Jewish physician who was protected by Dr. Borromeo, the director. And a third, one Dr. Adriano Ossicini. Sorry, I get emotional at these times. I'm looking at his daughter. Dr. Adriano Ossicini, who passed away fairly recently, at the age of 99. May his memory be a blessing. Zichrono livracha. Incidentally, you can find the images of these three heroic rescuers in the program handout you're holding. Simply look for the three faces. Now, it's on this third hero, Dr. Ossicini, that will shine a special light this morning. You see, while Dr. Borromeo and Dr. Sacerdoti have been publicly honored at events such as this one, for obscure reasons, which Dr. Cristina Ossicini tried to explain last night, I think flimsy reasons, he was never publicly honored. Not in this way. his life-saving deeds have never been properly acknowledged. And so we want to correct it, as I said to Christina, we want to fix that this morning. For Dr. Ossicini not only joined with his two fellow collaborators and was equally involved in the rescue operation at Fatebenefratelli to save lives, he reportedly was the one who actually came up with the name Il Morbo di K, the K disease, or Syndrome K, which saved so many lives. Dr. Ossicini, I've also learned, was tortured as an anti-Mussolini activist. In fact, look for his wanted poster in the handout, his wanted poster. It says, wanted by police. Adriano Ossicini, armed subversive. It was he who turned the Fatebenefratelli Hospital into a headquarters for the Italian resistance by operating a secret radio transmitter in the hospital, and he escaped narrowly from that episode. I learned of the incredible heroism of this trio, Borromeo, Sacerdoti, Ossicini, from a film created by one Stephen Edwards in 2021 entitled Syndrome K. And when I saw the title of the film, well, the title just jumped right out at me. I felt it was a story that simply begged to be retold. After watching the film, I said, this needs to be told and celebrated, especially in this 80th anniversary year of the Fatebenefratelli rescue operation. Incidentally, I recommend that you watch the film, Syndrome K. It's a 1-hour film, approximately, available on Amazon Prime. In it, you'll find interviews of those whose lives were saved by the 3 doctors. I wish we could have flown them from Italy. They're very aged and most have passed away. But between 50 and 100 people were saved at Fatebenefratelli. Now, the hard part of planning this morning's event was locating and contacting Dr. Ossicini's daughter, Christina. That was the hardest part of all. The rest was pretty easy. And after contacting her and her husband, Giovanni, they agreed to travel from Italy in order to receive a United States Senate Certificate of Special Recognition from Senator Blumenthal, who will be here. That's his chair. Welcome. Shalom, Christina and Giovanni. What was Syndrome K? Il Morbo di K, Syndrome K, was a fake disease, a fictitious malady invented by doctors Borromeo, Sacerdoti, and Ossicini, which saved the lives of between 50, as I mentioned, and 100 Italian Jewish people. Now, at this point, I think it would be fitting to turn the program over to someone who knows much more than I do about the Syndrome K Rescue Project. Her name is Professor Millicent Marcus, known affectionately as Professor Penny Marcus. Millicent Penny Marcus is the Sarai Ribikoff Professor of Italian Studies at Yale University. Her specializations include medieval literature, Italian cinema, interrelationships between literature and film, and representations of the Holocaust in post-war Italian culture. She's the author of 6 books, including, by the way, go back to Amazon and buy one of her books. Buy them all. A fabulous author. She's the author of 6 books, including Italian Film in the Shadow of Auschwitz. She's the co-editor of New Reflections on Primo Levi, Before and After Auschwitz, and has team-taught courses on representations of the Holocaust in literature and film over the years. On a personal level, among her proudest achievements, she tells me, is having raised 2 children who speak Italian with a perfect, she tells me, Florentine accent. And her hope is that someday her 3 grandchildren will be able to do the same. It gives me great pleasure at this time to call upon Professor Marcus. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you.
Buongiorno. Welcome, everyone. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Maybe this one? Is this one better?
Try both.
Both? Stereophonic? Sorry. That better? Yes, okay, great. And if I talk too fast, just hold up your hands like this because I feel so emotional and so excited to be here that I might sort of race through this. So don't let me do that. And so I want to begin with a beautiful Italian phrase, Casa di Vita, house of life. This was the designation conferred upon the various houses that gave shelter to Jews under the Nazi occupation by the Raoul Wallenberg Foundation. A Casa di Vita could literally be a household that took in Jewish neighbors to save them, or a hospital, as in the case of Adriano Ossicini and his 2 medical colleagues. And you'll be hearing these names again and again and again, but doctors Giovanni Borromeo and Vittorio Sacerdoti. And I don't want to get ahead of myself here because what I want to do is give you a kind of broad historical context for understanding the condition of Italy's Jews before going into the daring rescue plan that Rabbi already sort of previewed for you. So it's a little known fact that the Italian Jewish community is the oldest Jewish community in Europe. And we have records dating back to the 4th century BCE about a group of merchants from the Holy Land who settled on the banks of the Tiber. And here they flourished, and the community actually got to the level of 50,000 during the ancient Roman Empire. And that's more than the populace of Jews during the Holocaust in Italy. The community in Rome became the seedbed for all of the Italian Jewish communities throughout the country. But we need to fast forward now to the Christian era, which was a time of restrictions, taxations, and repressions, all encompassed in the phenomenon of the ghetto. Now, another little known fact is that ghetto is an Italian word. It was the name of the specific area in Venice where the Jews were confined, and it was the area where the Venetian iron foundry was located. But when the German Jews actually came to settle in the country in the 16th century, they couldn't pronounce that soft G sound, the J sound. So they brought their guttural German accent, and getto, which means iron casting, to cast, getto in Italian became ghetto amongst these the German migrants to the area in Venice that we're talking about. And so now you know the origin of the term that's become, alas, such an important part of our universal vocabulary. So ghettoization in 16th century Venice meant what we think of it today: overcrowded, unsanitary conditions in tightly confined areas. It meant chronic poverty in the Jewish case due to the restrictions in trades that Jews could practice. They could be rag pickers, they could deal in secondhand goods, but of course they could also serve as doctors. who were in high demand among the Gentile population even then. The ghetto condition persisted then with some rare periods of tolerance until 1870, when Italy finally unified as a sovereign nation state, imbued by European progressive values of the revolutions that swept through the entire continent in the mid-19th century. For the Jews, this meant emancipation from the ghetto. It meant full entrance into the rights and privileges of citizenship, which was a status they embraced with exuberance and pride. So this previously segregated minority, it was easily absorbed into Italian life, thanks to the fact that they did not speak Yiddish, they spoke Italian, and thanks to the fact that their dress and their customs were indistinguishable from those of their Gentile neighbors. What did distinguish them from non-Jewish Italians was their high rate of literacy, 94%, as opposed to the 45% of the population at large. This meant that they had a tremendous advantage upon entering into the Italian context. So they earned prestigious positions in the spheres of politics, the military, education, commerce, law, and of course, medicine. This enthusiastic embrace then of Italian identity meant that when Mussolini came to power in 1922, Jews accepted fascism in equal numbers to those of their compatriots. Now, here it's important to note that anti-Semitism was not a component of Mussolini's original agenda. One of his mistresses, in fact, was Jewish. But the point I'm trying to make is that racism was not integral to fascist ideology at the start. Mussolini's goal was imperial, not biological. He aspired to resurrect the ancient Roman Empire, not to create. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Not to create an Italian super race. But by 1938, it was a different story. This was the year that Mussolini consolidated his alliance with Hitler. And he launched then a vicious anti-Semitic campaign through the promulgation of what's called le leggi razziali, draconian laws, which excluded Jews from all sectors of public life. And so at this point, I want to show you a newsreel clip of Mussolini's speech in Trieste to launch the anti-Semitic campaign. And I'm afraid it's very pirated, so the visual and auditory quality is not great, but I want you to get a sense of listening to his voice and seeing and listening to the crowds below in the piazza, cheering him on as he announces the racial campaign. So I'm going to ask Derek if he would kindly show this clip.
Che gli imperi si conquistano con le armi, ma si tengono col prestigio. E per il prestigio occorre una chiara, severa coscienza razziale che stabilisca non soltanto delle differenze, ma delle verità nettissime. Il problema ebraico non è dunque che un aspetto di questo fenomeno. La nostra posizione è stata determinata da questi incontestabili dati di fatto. L'ebraismo morale è stato durante 16 anni, malgrado la nostra politica, un nemico irreconciliabile del fascismo.
So these racial laws were very, very, very vicious, even worse than the Nuremberg laws. from their neighbors to the north. So Jews were banned from the following sectors: from schools, from serving in the military, which was a hardship for them given their degree of patriotism, barred from political office, from holding government jobs, from the exercise of all professions. They were barred. They were barred from possessing more than a certain amount of property. They were barred from owning radios, which was the mass medium of the time. They were barred from telephone listings, obituary notices, and they were condemned to civic death. In other words, fascist anti-Semitic rules amounted to re-ghettoization, not in terms of where Jews could live, but in terms of how Jews could live. And this brings us then to the threshold of World War II for Italy. Italy enters into the conflict, of course, on the side of Germany in June 1940. I don't have time now to go through the chronicle of all the disastrous military results of Mussolini's alliance with Hitler. But suffice it to say that when the Allies landed in Sicily in the summer of 1943, beginning the grueling 22-month campaign up then the peninsula to liberate the country, Mussolini's dictatorship came to an abrupt end. He was deposed by the fascist Grand Council and imprisoned on a mountaintop in the remote Italian region of Abruzzo. But the most dramatic turn of events took place then on September the 8th, 1943, when Italy's post-Mussolini government surrendered to the Allies. And as one character put it in the Oscar-winning film Mediterraneo, some of you may have seen it, on September 8th, quote, "Our friends became our enemies, and our enemies became our friends." And the film's character was referring then to the immediate massing of German troops on the northern border, their invasion and occupation of the entire country. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, the official Italian government surrenders to the Allies, making Italy co-belligerent then with the Allied liberation campaign. So Italy is completely divided in two. For the Jews, then the shift from fascist to Nazi rule under the Germans was catastrophic. What had been discrimination under the racial laws became deportation and extermination under the Germans. And this is where our story of rescue comes in. The setting is Fatebenefratelli Hospital, as Rabbi said, in Rome. And as Rabbi said, the name means do good brothers. And this is what the brothers, the friars, the mendicant friars would say as they went through the streets and past other people walking through, asking for alms for the poor. And I was thinking that in Jewish terms, the phrase Fatebenefratelli, do good brothers, would be equal to an appeal for tzedakah. But of crucial importance to our story is the fact that Fatebenefratelli was a Catholic institution. This meant that it was outside the control of the Italian state. It was not beholden to fascist policies. And it could operate independently then of the regime under the auspices of the Vatican. And here I need to open a brief parenthesis. The role of Pope Pius XII during the Holocaust. It's been a subject of great controversy. It will continue to be so, I think, for the foreseeable future. And this controversy came from his dual capacity as being, on the one hand, the spiritual leader of the church with a capital C, and on the other hand, the head of a secular government. The fact that the Vatican was itself a tiny, sovereign nation state that had contacts with the entire secular world. And so this is important to remember. Also, Pius, before taking on the papal mantle, was the Vatican's diplomatic envoy to Germany for 12 years. And this also can explain a little bit his sympathy, actually, for German culture. As Pope, he never publicly denounced Nazi persecution of the Jews. He remained neutral. But, and this is something we have to remember, that while the Vatican was silent, on the local level, Catholic institutions were heroic in saving the lives of the Jews. Churches, monasteries, orphanages, convents welcomed Jews with open arms, fully aware of the mortal risk that they ran in this process. These entities, and this is important, acted spontaneously without seeking Vatican permission and only alerting the Holy See after the fact, when it was too late for any interdiction of these rescue efforts to happen. And this is where our three heroes come in. Giovanni Borromeo was a highly respected doctor in Rome, and he was offered the position of head medical officer in 2 hospitals in the 1930s. He refused them both. Why? Because these 2 hospitals were state-run institutions requiring staff members to swear loyalty to the regime. Borromeo was a staunch anti-fascist. When Fatebenefratelli invited him then to head their hospital, given its freedom from state control, Borromeo jumped at the chance. He then hired 2 colleagues who were also otherwise unemployable. Vittorio Sacerdoti, because he was a Jew, and Adriano Ossicini, who had run afoul of the regime as an outspoken anti-fascist. Ossicini, as Rabbi said, had been arrested for his political activism, once for a fiery speech at a conference of the Catholic University Students' Organization, which landed him in fascist jail, and a second time, resulting in torture, as Rabbi said, with a beating so severe that it caused a permanent hole in his rib cage. It's of the utmost importance then to note that Ossicini's activism had its roots in deeply held Catholic beliefs, among them imperative to fight justice and to render aid to those in need. And as the rabbi was speaking about, all great religions share these humane values, and Ossicini took them deeply to heart. Let me add that his religious values were such, as Rabbi said, that he took up arms, and because of this was wanted by the police. And this led him to dangerous communications works, as he was the operator of an illegal radio station in the basement of the hospital. Okay. And this radio station allowed Ossicini to be in touch with resistance headquarters in Brindisi in southern Italy, an area that had already been liberated. And Ossicini got that information from headquarters and was able to relay that to partisan cells throughout Rome. So you can see how important he was as a communications expert as well. So now to the specifics of the rescue plot. And here we need to shift our attention to geography, because geography plays a crucial role in the rescue. And at this point, I'm going to ask Derek, and here we don't need sound, we just need the visuals. There, okay, can you see? Can you all see? And I hope you who are watching on Zoom can see. It is very small. I'll describe it to you. What you're seeing here is the fact that the hospital is on a tiny island in the midst of the Tiber. It's called Isola Tiberina, is the name of the little tiny island. The hospital was 200 meters across from the ghetto and from the Tempio Maggiore, which means the main synagogue of the area, 200 yards from it. And interestingly, it was connected by a bridge to the ghetto area, and on the other side connected by a bridge to Trastevere, which means across the Tiber. This was in one of the original places of ancient Roman settlements, because it was easier to build two short bridges than one long bridge across the Tiber itself. So this put the Fatebenefratelli Hospital in a very strategic position. And I'm wondering if, yeah, I'm sorry, it's too small. If we could see this slide better, in the far distance in the background, you can see on the horizon the Dome of St. Peter's. So you see the relationship between the actual buildings of the Vatican on the one hand, the Tempio Maggiore, the great synagogue, and then Fatebenefratelli on this little tiny island. So I hope you get an idea of the strategic geography that we're dealing with here. Okay, it was this proximity to the ghetto. Now I need to tell you about a fact that happened right before the rescue is going to take place. And this is a terrible, terrible raid where Nazi SS stormed into the ghetto of Rome, and in the wee hours of the morning on October 16th, 1943, roused people from their beds, loaded them onto trucks on the first phase of their journey to Auschwitz. 1,259 Jews were deported. A handful survived. Some of the ghetto dwellers were able to evade Nazi capture. And because they knew that there was a Jewish doctor, Vittorio Sacerdoti, at the hospital, they thought that this would be their salvation. But salvation was by no means guaranteed when they came to hide in the hospital, because the proximity of the hospital to the ghetto immediately aroused Nazi suspicions. And Borromeo was sure that a visit was in the offing, and he was right. When word reached the hospital that a convoy was on its way, Borromeo, Sacerdoti, and Ossicini were ready. And so was the entire hospital staff, from the humblest janitor to the upper echelons of the hospital administration, and everyone in between: nurses, lab technicians, cafeteria workers, file clerks. Everyone was in on the conspiracy to save their Jews. The slightest leak would have doomed the entire process, and wholesale Nazi retribution would have followed. But it didn't. Everyone kept the secret, and that's part of the miracle of this amazingly complex operation. What was the first order of business? The first order of business was to get rid of the radio station in the basement, because if Nazis discovered that, it would have unmasked the hospital as a resistance enclave, as, quote, an urban medical guerrilla site, end quote. Ossicini took care of the radio problem in the nick of time. He simply dumped it into the Tiber right there, right outside the doors of the hospital. But that was the easy part. The far more complex part was the staging of ultimately the brilliant hoax that would save the hospital Jews from deportation. And as Rabbi said, it was Ossicini himself who came up with this idea to invent a fake disease so contagious that it required total isolation of its victims from the outside world. Ossicini was the one, as the rabbi said, who gave the label, the ominous label, Syndrome K, or Sindrome Kappa in Italian. It was described as a neurodegenerative disease involving the following symptoms: headache, nausea, vomiting, coughing, convulsions, dementia, paralysis, and disfigurement, all leading to sure death by asphyxiation. As you might be able to intuit, key to the success of this scheme was its very ambiguity of symptoms. It left much to the fevered imaginations of the Nazis, who were quick to link the disorder to cancer or tuberculosis. Now, you need to know that the letter K does not exist in the Italian alphabet. So right away, when they came up with Syndrome Kappa K, Italians knew something was up. And it was Ossicini's daring in-joke, because K, in this case, referred to the last names of two nefarious Nazi commanders of Rome, Albert Kesselring, head of the Nazi army in Rome, and Herbert Kappler, leader of the SS in Rome. So it's a double K, really, syndrome double K. To pull off the hoax, the most elaborate staging was required. Jews hiding in the hospital were listed in hospital records as suffering from Syndrome K. This served as a code for all staff members when they saw Syndrome K on the file to tell those staff members that these patients, quote unquote, were fugitives, not sick people, and they didn't require medication. These sick people were confined to the isolation wards on the second floor of the hospital, lying on cots aside to them. Each patient then had a placard emblazoned with the words of the dreaded diagnosis. And when Borromeo would lead the Nazi officers on their hospital tour and would go particularly to the second floor, to the corridor outside the isolation unit, the patients had been instructed to cough as loudly and as persistently as possible. And so forewarned, though, they had been forewarned, the Nazis, that this was a virulent contagion. These ruthless SS soldiers cowered in fear, or to use Sacerdoti's term, they ran like frightened rabbits away from the floor. And just to complete the bureaucratic aspect of the scheme, those patients who were actually smuggled to safety were listed in the hospital files as deceased, having succumbed to Syndrome K. Historian Francesco Buscemi reports that the Nazis were never disabused of their belief in the existence of this dread plague. And to quote this historian, this was one instance where disinformation, fear, and ignorance worked as a force for good, end quote. At this point, I'd like to show you some images. And again, I apologize for how small they are, but I want to show you one slide of Ossicini as a young doctor in a lab. Maybe he's cooking up Syndrome K. And then we're going to flash forward to the period long after the war, showing Ossicini as a family man. He had 4 children, and he had many grandchildren. So we will show these slides, and I hope you can see. Oh, Derek, could you go to the one before? There you go. Can you see the image? There he is. Oh, good. Thank you for watching. Thank you. Okay, there he is as a young man in the 1940s at this point. Thank you. There he is as a young man in the 1940s. Here he is as a nonno, a grandpa, with some of his grandchildren. And then the next one, if you would, yeah. Can you enlarge that, Derek? Yeah, there he is. And there he is with his wife and several of the grandchildren. And my favorite one, my favorite slide is the last one. If you could, yeah, there he is with more grandchildren.
Christina, show us. Where are you?
Oh, no, me.
Oh, I see.
This is my daughter, Camila. This is my son, Tommaso.
This is her daughter and her son. Christina's daughter. That's grandchildren.
Oh,
The daughter of my sister,
Yes.
Claudia, and Bianca, and Marco, the daughter and son of my brother.
wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to close then. And yeah, can we have the lights back on? Actually, that'd be great. Thank you so much. I want to add that in the post-war years, Adriano Ossicini had a very distinguished career as a psychiatrist and a renowned politician, serving as a senator in the Italian parliament for 3 decades and minister of health for a year during the 1990s. So he's very prominent in several fields. So to conclude, I began this talk with a beautiful Italian phrase, casa di vita, house of life. English has 2 words for casa, house and home. House is a physical building, a cold word. Home is a word that radiates connotations of warmth, comfort, and true belonging. It's significant, I think, that Italian doesn't need 2 words, does not separate house and home the way we do in English. The one word combines them. And Fatebenefratelli became a casa di vita in the double English sense, as a physical shelter and as a place of true belonging. The Jewish minority of Rome, as we said, dated back 2,000 years, but often living as a community apart. That community found its true casa, its place of physical shelter and belonging, in a Catholic hospital on a tiny island in the midst of the Tiber River. And it is to the trio of doctors who made this casa a place of vita for those Jews who would have otherwise lost their vita, that we celebrate and we dedicate our celebration today. And it's one member of the trio, as we said, Adriano Ossicini in particular, whom we honor this morning in the presence of his daughter, Cristina Ossicina, herself a doctor. She's a neonatologist who carries on her father's legacy by caring for new lives in need of help. And so let me close by extending the phrase casa di vita beyond Fatebenefratelli to all of Italy, whose Jewish population had a survival rate of 80%, second only to Denmark's among the Nazi-occupied countries of Europe. This survival rate is attributed to, as I said, the Catholic institutions on the local level, and also on the local level to the courage of so many Italian individuals who made their homes case di vita, aware of the mortal risk that they serve. As Adriano Ossicini said at the end of the beautiful film that Rabbi mentioned, and I hope you'll see, he said, when all is over, bravery will win out. Zikrono Labraka. Thank you so much.
At this time, yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Professor Penny, Millicent, Marcus. At this time, we're going to call upon our guest of honor, but first, Derek, there's one picture of Christina's father that I love. Would you please put that up? I just love this picture. See it? There it is. Can you see that? Lillian, could you shut the light for a second? Yeah. This is my favorite picture. I don't know why, but I don't know. It just captures a bit of his soul, for me anyway. Keep that up, please. Keep that. Yeah. Lillian, would you turn the light on? So at this time, we would like to introduce our guest of honor who has traveled all the way from Rome with her beloved husband, Giovanni. And we've come to know them. We had supper on Friday. We had supper on Saturday night. And they're going to tour New York City after this event. It gives me such great pleasure to call upon Dr. Adriano Ossicini. Her words appear on the back of this handout. What she's about to say appears on the back of the handout. Look at this at the last page. This is the back side. You see it? Yeah.
Good morning. It's a great honor for me to be here and to receive this important recognition on behalf of my father. My dad would be very thankful. Since I was young, I listened to this touching story in my father's own words, but it is only as an adult that I began to comprehend the true importance and the true risk that was taken by those who made it possible to save so many lives. In the account my father will share with me and my siblings, it always struck me how my dad, at only 23 years of age, just a bit more than a child, had gathered within himself the courage to put his life at such risk for others. Often I would ask, but Dad, weren't you scared? Didn't you realize that you were risking your life? He would always minimize what he did, answering, yes, I knew, but would have done it too. It was the right thing to do. My father had a long life. He lived to the age of almost 99. In his professional life, both as a psychiatrist and as a politician, he always dedicated himself to people in need, struggling to defend their rights. If I had to think of one of his main qualities, I would say that he made me feel safe at all times. And this was true not only when I was a child. After all, children always regard their parents as heroes. But even throughout my adult years, I felt the same way. He made me feel safe. His greatest lesson for me was always to recognize and appreciate the positive aspects of life, never to take them for granted, and to always be on the side of those who are less fortunate. I've tried to put these values into my work as neonatal pediatrician, which often led me to be in close contact with parents who were dealing with very difficult health situations. I hope that what I received from my father has always been passed down to my own children, who were lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time with him. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart, and thank you from the whole family, my whole family, to all of you who made a special recognition possible for my dad. And thanks special to Rabbi Winehouse and to Professor Penny Marcus. Thank you, thank you. Grazie. Grazie.
You will get a certificate now. That is the senator. Stay there. Stay right there. Let's be seated. The time has come to introduce Senator Richard Blumenthal, who will present a certificate of special recognition to Dr. Christina, which she will receive on behalf of her late father, Adriano, of blessed memory. Senator Blumenthal has served as the United States Senator from the state of Connecticut since 2011, and this is his 17th consecutive year of participation in our Kristallnacht, consecutive year, uninterrupted of participation in our Kristallnacht Commemoration. Thank you so much, Senator Blumenthal, for your support.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yes, 17 consecutive years, but who's counting? You know, a lot of life is just showing up. And the reason I have come every year is very simply, I am inspired and moved by this occasion every year, every single year. As many of you know, Rabbi Winehouse and the congregation honor a really very special example of courage and fortitude, the kind of values that are exemplified by Dr. Ossicini and Drs. Borromeo and Sacerdoti. You know, I think this ceremony has special meaning at this moment in our history, the world's history, our history as a people. The Jewish people who hid at that hospital on an island in the Tiber River were running. They were running from death, persecution, from deportation. And so were the people who ran in the south of Israel when Hamas attacked. I recently visited Israel. I saw the hideous videos, stomach turning, heartbreaking, taken by Hamas of people seeking to run and hide. And one of the ministers of the Israeli war cabinet said to me, these people tried to run and hide. Throughout our history, we have tried to run and hide. Israel was supposed to be the place where we no longer had to run and hide, a safe place. We cannot allow Hamas on our border. And Israel was always supposed to be a safe place until October 7th. It was regarded as a safe place, and that attack shook to the core Israel, the Jewish people all around the world, and has unleashed a wave of anti-Semitism that is perhaps unprecedented in our lifetime. You have all, or many of you have heard me talk about my own dad who escaped the Holocaust to come here. At the age of 17, he came alone without knowing anyone. He spoke no English. He had not much more than a shirt on his back. He was 17 years old and he came alone. And I once asked him as a teenager, I said to him, you know, this can never happen again. It can never happen again in this world. And he said, it can happen anywhere there's hatred. Today, we celebrate and we commemorate three heroes who risked their lives to provide a safe place. And Christina has mentioned that Dr. Ossicini made her feel safe. He made a safe place for a handful of Jewish people, but many perished. And the courage and fortitude that we mark today, I think, is very special at this moment, because we need to assure that Israel is a safe place. And that is why I have said from the very start, despite some of the voices on the other side, the United States must stand in solidarity with Israel today, tomorrow, and forever. And I am proud to be an American and proud to have relatives in Israel, proud to have a cousin who is now serving in the IDF on the front. But I will just emphasize in closing, Israel is a strategic ally in one of the most dangerous areas of the world. And I know we are not here about Israel. I know that this is a gratuitous set of remarks, Rabbi, forgive me, but once you give the pulpit to a senator, there's no telling where they're going to go. Israel did not exist when Dr. Ossicini and Dr. Sacerdoti and Dr. Borromeo exhibited this extraordinary courage and provided safety. But perhaps we can take a lesson that there are people in this world, good people, who will come to our side at this moment of crisis. And we should recognize and thank them. So today I want to thank Christina, all of Dr. Ossicini's families. We have a certificate of special recognition from the Senate of the United States for her, from one senator in honor of another senator. My mother always wished I had become a doctor, I think. My brother is a doctor, but not a psychiatrist. But I'm enormously honored, and we have certificates of recognition from the other two partners of Dr. Ossicini, who made this possible. To you, Christina, thank you so much for being here. I'm very honored.
Folks, Senator Blumenthal has a very busy morning. And he's a veteran, so happy Veterans Day to you. Yeah. Index cards were placed on your seats. Perhaps you've begun to write questions on those index cards. They're going to be collected. Rabbi Pernick, you'll check the chat box below, I believe. Are you going to check the chat box? Or raise your hand if you have a question, and we will and Rabbi Pernick will conduct a question and answer session. You just want to focus on the cards? Please address your questions, if you can, to a specific individual, either Professor Marcus, Christina, Dr. Christina, myself.
Well,
This is Rabbi Joshua Pernick, who is the rabbi in residence at the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven, and he's doing an amazing job of pulling us all together, especially in this very challenging time. So why don't you give him a nice round of applause? Yes.
so, well, thank you, Rabbi Wainhouse, and thank you to Dr. Marcus, Dr. Ossicini. I just want to start, I guess, with one question that I was thinking about. Dr. Ossicini, from your remarks, I was struck by you saying that your father was only 23 years old at the time of this operation. And it made me think about what influences he had as a child and as a teenager that led him to be willing to risk his life to save people he never met before. Could you share a little bit about your family, your father's family and grandparents, and where that courage came from? Family.
Sorry, I speak in Italian because it's so difficult for me to answer. And Penny, help me. Penso che abbia avuto influenza su mio padre il fatto di aver perso suo padre quando aveva solo 16 anni. Sì.
So Christina's saying that what had a big influence on her was that that her father, Adriano, lost his father when he was just 16 anni,
Yes.
when he was just 16 years old.
And he was the first, and he has 6 sisters and 1 brother, and he was the eldest. So è cresciuto rapidamente. Okay.
So he was the one of 8 children, 6 sisters and 1 brother, and at the age of 16, because he was now the male figure in the family, at the age of 16, he had to grow up very fast.
E poi credo fosse nel suo carattere, cosa che ho visto anche io da figlia negli anni, non aver timore di mettersi in gioco, anche come dicevamo a rischio della propria vita.
So even as a young man, he never had any doubts about putting himself at risk. He was fearless, actually.
Okay, I answer?
No.
Thank you. I'll go to the first question from the cards, and feel free to write your own questions on the cards. Hopefully we'll get to many, if not most of them. One question, and maybe this one is more for Dr. Marcus, is how has the Italian Jewish community and the synagogues of Rome done after the Shoah?
Oh. Yes. So how is the Italian Jewish community in general?
How is it done in the aftermath of the
In
Shoah?
the after, yeah. Well, one effect, I think, was the desire to be quiet and to not call attention to themselves as a community. In all the years that I've been visiting Italy, which is since 1966, since the flood in Florence, I was not really aware of a Jewish community. There was a kind of desire to just blend in. And then more recently, as the years have gone by, and those who survived or witnesses or even bystanders are dying and no longer able to bear witness, there has become an increasing desire to speak out, to write books, members of the community themselves, to write novels. There's Primo Levi, you might have heard of, the foremost Jewish survivor in Italy. And his books were not really, there was a discomfort about reading them even, but now that the generations have passed, it seems like it's more possible to have a discourse, an Italian Jewish discourse, and also in film. And this is something that I've studied a lot. Many of you might have heard of the film, the beautiful film, The Garden of the Finzi Contini. Yes, and that came out in 1970. But it's one of the exceptions. And then with Life is Beautiful, which is a controversial, but I think very important film, it's as if the floodgates had opened, and now more and more representation of the Holocaust in various forms, written form, a television series, and even films. And so I think it's made it easier for the Italian Jewish community to be more public about their struggles and their grief. Yeah. Non so, Cristina, se vuole dire qualcosa. Okay.
So I'm going to take two of the questions on the cards and put them together. So one question for Dr. Ossicini is whether your father remained in touch with the other two doctors who he was part of this operation with.
Yes,
So start with that.
he remained, but he was so younger than the other. So for qualche anno, io penso, non molto a lungo, ma anche con I figli, rimase in contatto con I figli.
Oh,
Yes.
di Sacerdoti e di Borromeo. Okay. Well, so Ossicini was much, much, much younger than the other two doctors. Borromeo was the head doctor who hired him, and a man of experience. I don't know exactly what age, but as you know, that Adriano was just 23. And so it's almost a generational difference. And so after the events that we talked about, there was not that much contact, but Ossicini was in contact with the children of Borromeo, e anche Sacerdoti. No, were very much in contact with Borromeo's children, who would have been more or less his generation.
Thank you. And then sort of a follow-up question from another card is about the way that Italian society has viewed the story of those heroes like your father who stood up to fascism and who stood up to the Nazi regime. How are those stories told, or are those stories told within Italy in the post-war period?
Cioè, si è raccontata.
Se la storia di tuo padre e gli altri, Borromeo, Sacerdoti, se queste storie vengono distribuite e conosciute.
My father wrote a book about this story. And so...
Can you hear?
Oh, sorry. My father wrote a book about this story, about a part of his life. And it's time to read this book to comprehend the whole story. So, I understand.
Yes.
I understand the questions.
The title of the book?
The title of the book is Un'isola sul Tevere, an island on the Tiber.
That's perfect. That actually answers another question I have here on the card about whether your father did any writing about the events, which is great. There's another question on that card as well, asking about your mother. I don't know if your father was married at this time. If he was, what did your mother know, if anything?
Still alive.
Yeah, and did she know about the events?
She's 96 years old. And she said, you translate for me. Quando ha saputo che venivo qua, mi ha detto: mi faccio piccola piccola e mi porti in valigia con te, così vedo questo importante evento per papà.
So her mother's 96 years old, And when she heard that Cristina and Giovanni had been invited, she said, I'm going to make myself very small so I can fit into your suitcases and come with you.
And did she know about, was she married to your father at the time?
23.
Years right.
My mother?
Your mother, yeah.
Sì, 23 years old.
Okay.
It's
Erano
the different
sposati-
7 years between them.
Ma erano sposati nei tempi di...
No,
No,
not
infatti.
yet. Not,
Not yet.
no.
Great, thank you. There's a question here asking about how those who ended up at the hospital, how they were, chosen or selected. How did those particular Jews end up at the hospital, where they were able to be saved? I don't know. Do we know the answer to that question?
So my understanding was that these were people who escaped from the ghetto during the SS storming of the area in the raid of October 16th, 1943. And but it also, and because they knew that there was a Jewish doctor there, Sacerdoti, but my sense too is apparently this rescue operation went on until the liberation of Rome, which was in June 1944. So we're talking about what, about 8 months when this hiding. And so my guess is, and again, I need to read the book, which Christina brought me a copy fresh from Rome. So I'm very excited. But my guess is that the other Jews who were hiding in Rome and who were afraid of actually being found out and caught and deported, then would come to the hospital because they knew it was a sanctuary, place of, a safe place. And so this took place up until the liberation in June 44. So that's my sense of how they came to be hidden there and covered by the diagnosis of Syndrome K.
Perfect. And then I guess as a follow-up to that, there's a question about when it came to light that's, to society at large, that Syndrome K was a hoax. So was that only after liberation? Was it years after liberation that this was all made up?
When the Nazis found out or when everybody found out?
Well, either the Nazis found out or everyone else. When did the story come to light?
Quando si è scoperto che questa storia era veramente una fizione, questa storia del morbo di...
Anni dopo, quando i protagonisti l'hanno raccontata.
So this only came out years later, when the three men actually began to tell it. Si sa più o meno quando?
No, I don't know.
No. We don't know exactly when. Have to read the book.
So this question for Dr. Ossicini, at what age did you find out this story? When did your father start telling you about his work?
I think I was 6 or 7 years old, but he told me as a story lighter. Is it possible to say lighter? Yes. Then I understand later the main, the importance.
So he told her when she was 6 or 7, just to summarize, but in a way that was not too dark and heavy, because I guess a 6-year-old, you can't really impose upon them such dire information and such painful truths. And later, as Christina matured, she began to understand the gravity of what her father had done.
Thank you. So this question asks about the recognition for your father, and how has the story been recognized in your father and his partners? Have their story been recognized, by Israel and by others as righteous among the nations? If you can share a bit, I know it's a little complicated, I was hearing before, but if you could share a little about that story.
Perché non è stato riconosciuto? Te lo dico a te. Per quel motivo dei testimoni che erano troppo giovani vecchi e gli altri sono tutti morti. E lui mi ha contattata, cioè sono stata contattata, ma non è stato possibile. Ok?
Mhm. So the issue, there was with Yad Vashem, there has been a technical administrative difficulty with recognizing Ossicini as one of the righteous among the nations, which is that apparently you need proof. And the proof comes in the form of having witnesses come forward and testifying that they saw you or that they had direct experience of the rescue in this case. And since it's been so long, the adults who could have testified to that are all dead. And Christina was able to trace it down. There is a living witness who was 4 years old at the time. And Yad Vashem said, too young to give credible witness. So a 4-year-old is not satisfactory. And apparently Ossicini, suffered from this. He really felt very sorry that he was not recognized by Israel. Yeah.
Thank you. So I have a question here about, you mentioned your father was the oldest of his siblings, and he was only 16 years old when his father passed away. So I wonder, did his mother and siblings know about what he was doing in the hospital and that he was risking his lives to save other people?
Allora, la domanda è che se i fratelli di tuo padre sapeva che quando lui aveva 23 anni ha rischiato la vita facendo queste cose.
Non al momento.
Non al momento,
Non al
nemmeno la
momento,
madre.
nemmeno la mamma, no.
So at the time of the events, his brothers and his mother didn't know. They didn't know. Oh, could you hear me what I said? Yeah. They didn't know. I guess it would have put them in danger to have that knowledge. Yeah. It would have, what? Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask a question of my own. We were just talking about your father's siblings and mother. I'm wondering, we saw the beautiful pictures of the grandchildren, and I wonder how the story of your father has impacted your children, your nieces and nephews, how they carry the story with them.
Impatto sui figli?
Sì, ai nipotini.
Yes, I think, penso che abbia avuto un grande impatto e che lui sia stato per loro un grande esempio. Io lo spero anche.
So she thinks the impact was very great, and that the grandfather, the nonno, served as a beautiful model for children and grandchildren. And poi aggiungo di te, because Christina, as I said, is a neonatologist and very committed to helping little children. She worked for a long time in Fatebenefratelli and helping premature, she's present at the births, particularly if there's a sense that there could be something that's going to go wrong. And then she takes care of those children. And with obviously the spirit of her own father helping the needy.
So there's a couple of questions that I might put together here, just about the other doctors. We heard about the Jewish doctor was part of the group, Sacerdoti, and if there was particular danger that he faced, if the Nazis knew he was Jewish, how his relationship with the other doctors, if the doctors, if they were recognized and they could have spoken about your father. So I guess a couple of questions just about sort of those doctors, and I guess I'm thinking about both their relationship after the war and sharing the story, and also during that time, what unique threats they were under, and particularly Dr. Sacerdoti for being Jewish. Was there threat he was under by virtue of being a Jew in this Nazi occupied region?
La minaccia per quelli, i tre, no? durante l'operazione c'era una minaccia particolare, cioè una paura dalla parte di sacerdoti di essere scoperto come ebreo.
Sì, lui era nascosto, aveva un nome falso, era stato nascosto perché non poteva lavorare in nessun altro ospedale. E allora Borromeo lo aveva chiamato e lo faceva lavorare lì al Fatebenefratelli sotto falso nome.
So the Jewish doctor, the Sacerdoti, was hired under an assumed name instead of Sacerdoti, which is an obvious Jewish last name. He became Salviucci, which is a play on the word of somebody who is saved. Salvare is the word to save, so Salviucci, a little person who's saved. And so under that name, he was protected by a false identity. And so whether or not he felt the threat or not, I mean, I think that these three men were all so courageous and so committed to what they were doing, and so ingenious and resourceful, that I think that any threat, the obvious threats are there, but they were going to persevere, and they did.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ossicini, Dr. Marcus, for translating for us. Really appreciate you being here.
Gosh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't know if it was brought out. I'm not remembering if someone one of our speakers mentioned it. But Dr. Christina worked at Fatebenefratelli for 30 years as a neonatologist at her daddy's hospital, Fatebenefratelli. Yeah. Gail Schlossberg is next in our program. So I'd like to turn now to our partners, the partners in our annual Kristallnacht community-wide commemoration, the CEO of Greater New Haven's Jewish Federation, Gail Schlossberg. Gail, I'm sure you'd like to bring a word of welcome to our attendees this morning, and Mazel Tov on your new assignment. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, I get to be along the lines of the closer here. So it's good to be with you. It's always good to be here for this particular event. It's not lost on me, and I'm sure not on you, that we are together again to learn and to remember Kristallnacht. I don't know about any of you, but when I saw the clip from Professor Marcus of the crowds cheering at the beginning in 1938, I don't know about the rest of you, but that gave me chills. I looked and remembered what I'm seeing on TV with rallies and cheering that really shakes you as a Jew, as a human being, to our core. Why do we remember Kristallnacht? We remember it so we should know, and it shouldn't happen again. So we should learn and be prepared, so it should never happen again. That's why we come together to learn about this. And Dr. Ossicini, thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful. Dr. Ossicini is here talking about what her father did in that moment of making those hard decisions. What do you do when you're confronted with evil? So she's here to talk about and to teach us about what her father did. I'm here to ask you, in this time, in our Jewish history and experience, what will we do? What will we do now when we are faced with terrible evil? What will we do when our children ask, what did you do in that time of need? You've all got a card here in front of you. It says never again is now. At the Federation, we've tried to make it as simple and clear as possible of what we can do together to stand with Israel, but also to protect our community. I can tell you every single day on my phone, I get a list of every anti-Semitic incident in our community, in our region, every time there's a threat. And I can tell you it's frightening. But we can't afford to be afraid and sit and wring our hands. We need to take action. Dr. Ossicini's father took action. We need to take action. On the card, you'll find the information that you need to take action at whatever you are comfortable with, whatever you can do. Do the thing that's uncomfortable. Because we don't get another chance. It's not now. If we don't act now, under what circumstances would we act? Tuesday, there is a rally for Israel in Washington, D.C. We are running buses from the JCC. It'll be a long, hard day. I don't know how many seats we have left. We have 20 seats left. You can go to, everything's on here. On Tuesday will be the largest rally for Israel in the history of this country, the United States. Please show up if you can. Be there if you can. Showing up matters. Senator Blumenthal said it, showing up matters. In addition to that, we have Super Sunday. Some of you may remember this from years ago. We haven't done it in a long time. Super Sunday at the JCC, November 19th from 10 to 1. We'll come together as a community. And yes, we'll raise money. But let me tell you what we're raising money for. We'll raise money for Israel, for humanitarian needs. But we'll also raise money for security for our community. And we'll raise money to gather together to combat anti-Semitism that we are seeing at unparalleled levels in our country. It's not a surge, it's not a spike, it's an explosion. So the time to act is now. Everything you need is on here. You can donate. Stay informed, advocate, please stay safe, and participate. The time is now. I thank you for the opportunity to come before you, to be with you. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you so much.
I've been told that there are cards available in the lobby. So if you didn't get a card, the card that Gail was referring to, they're available in the lobby. And this, we bring ourselves now to the conclusion of our gathering. We'll call now upon Sarah Derer. Ms. Sarah Derer is our new Adult Education Committee Chairperson. Please bring us words of greeting and announcements. Sarah Derer, a noted author of young people's books. Check her out on Amazon. I've been mentioning Amazon.
Store too.
And independent bookstores too, yes.
So I guess I'm closing for the closer.
Yes.
And first I wanted to address Dr. Ossicini, and I'm going to try and do it in Italian. So Dr. Marcus, you can grade me afterwards. Mille grazie alla dottoressa Cristina Ossicini e suo marito Giovanni Stefanini per aver affrontato il lungo viaggio da Roma a qui per essere con noi oggi. Dottoressa Cristina, in un momento come questo, in cui è facile sentirsi soli e preoccupati per via dell'aumento in antisemitismo, ci riempie di coraggio il sapere di eroi come suo padre. Grazie. My husband can tell you how many times I practice that. So what I said was, I thanked them for coming for such a long way, but also at a time where it's so easy to feel scared and alone. because of increasing anti-Semitism. It gives us courage to know of heroes like Dr. Adriano Ossicini. So first of all, I want to give special thanks to the sponsors of today's program, the Congregation Or Shalom Men's Club, Yellow Candle Fund, the Selman family, the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven, and Jimmy Shore. I also want to thank everyone on the Adult Ed Committee of Congregation Or Shalom for working so hard to organize this morning's event. And of course, thank you to Rabbi Wainhouse for conceiving the program. And thank you all for attending. I ask that you please, if you haven't already, consider donating to any or all of the morning sponsors. If there's we're very big on QR codes today, so there is a poster in the hallway that you can scan a QR code. It'll take you to a landing page where you can donate to any of the sponsors. And then I also wanted to tell you about the new LED memorial yahrzeit candles that are being sold at the back. They're very safe and convenient if you have a loved one who wants to commemorate a yahrzeit, who's living in a assisted living or a nursing home, or a college student, or you have kids who you are nervous about leaving around a candle. So those are available for purchase in the back. And then finally, to conclude our program today, I'd like to call on Cantor Kohava Monroe of Congregation B'nai Jacob, who's going to lead us in God Bless America. So please rise.
God bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
And happy Thanksgiving, everybody. May it be a blessed and peaceful and lovely Thanksgiving. Shalom, everybody. Am Yisrael Chai.